Yeah, the 1 minute would have been half time, which I know
Right.
is very much the standard. If there's been no trainers coming on to look after an injured player,
Right.
1 minute is the norm. And that, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, I go to a lot of matches, and it's invariably occasionally 2 minutes, but and if there's been a stoppage with an injury, maybe 3 minutes, but one is the norm. 3 minutes at the end is actually
Mm,
very unusual. And in
mm,
fact, I thought at the beginning of this season, we seem to get a lot of 7 minutes added on to the end of games. And I thought, yeah, maybe the refs and their panel, their bosses have said, we really do need to make sure that enough time is added on for these stoppages. But 7, even 8 minutes, sometimes longer, depending on why they're having that amount of time, seem to be
mm,
the norm. But it's interesting because I've seen a couple of games where you do get 3 or 4 minutes, and
mm.
it's kind of very much on the short side. Especially most teams do use 2 or 3 substitutes at least, so I think they allow 30 seconds per substitute. So if they bring 2 or 3 on at once, I mean that's 1.5, 2 minutes, whatever. So these things add up together with stoppages. So
Mm.
3 minutes doesn't seem right. I wouldn't query the 1 minute unless there were injuries,
Yeah.
but the 3 minutes. But again, I suppose you could say the calmer, even wiser person, the wiser head will say, look, and they're not going to change this. I don't want to go and get risk of booking. I don't want to get into an argument. The ref
Yeah.
didn't do a bad job. That is football. I used to play football a few years ago very regularly, not a particularly high standard,
Yeah.
but as well as loving it and sometimes sloshing around in the mud of the rain, that's all part of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's at the end of it, you get disappointed if you've lost. But that's the nature of it. That the highs are that much better when you know what it's like to lose, and that's true in life, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. Yeah. Now, there's something that is resulting from the incidents, and it was echoed by a guy called Keith Hackett. So he was a former Premier League
Former
referee.
ref, yeah.
Now, he suggested to Football Insider that the PGMOL should contemplate altering their rules concerning stoppage time. He said, can you remember when we had 10, 11, 14 minutes of added time on Premier League's games? And then he went on to say it lasted about 6 weeks. In the Merseyside derby today, referring to that match, he said 3 minutes, it's just not enough. Now,
Mm.
this is his final suggestion. He says the lawmaker must consider taking the timing of games out of the hands of the match officials and introduce an independent timekeeper who operates a stop clock inside the stadium. Now, what do you make of that?
Well, that's very similar, isn't it, to things like basketball, particularly
Right,
in America, ice hockey. I went to an ice hockey game a few months ago in Las Vegas, and it was a great experience. I don't think you've ever been there. It's ice hockey is wonderful to watch, but of course
right.
they have a lot of stoppages, and the clock stops. There's a visible clock to the crowd,
Yeah.
so it is taken out of the hands of the ref. And I think the same thing applies to basketball, but certainly some of those American games, particularly ice hockey, I think it's not the ref who's saying, "Oh, well, I think I'll add on this, that, and the other." So, actually, as a principle to your question, my
Yeah.
my answer in principle would be, "Yeah, I think that's a good idea." And even the refs may say, "Yeah, take that burden off of me." They're all connected by earphones, aren't they, and stuff, so they can be told, "Yeah, you've got to add." So they can be told, "Yeah, you've got to add on X minutes or whatever." I
Mm,
think that's a very good idea because sometimes I don't know, maybe sometimes the ref doesn't always pick up on the length of time some things take, like, for example, like the free kicks.
Mm,
And, a team that's winning 1-0 or by one goal,
mm,
awarded a free kick sort of towards the opponent's goal,
mm.
they can quite legitimately really just take their time in taking it. Under what happens now is almost so much faffing about in the wall that's built and all this stuff. So it's another means really of players time wasting. And of course we know refs have clamped down a bit on goalkeepers, and most goalkeepers do time waste when they're winning or they're not losing an away game, which they think a draw is a good result. So
Yeah.
refs do book them, rightly so, in my view. But yeah, to answer that question, I actually think it's a good idea for the PGMOL to consider, independent timing of the match, because the ref then is not going to be under any pressure to add a bit more time on if he thinks, well, am I going to bug up the players or the manager by saying only 4 minutes? I think it's a very good idea, and I think we're far more likely to get an accurate assessment of what that added on time should be. I think it's a
Mm,
really good idea.
wow. Well, I'm surprised you support that.
Do you not support it? Is that not your view?
Well, it's taking the autonomy out of the hands of referees, right? We've introduced the VAR, which is taking a lot of the burden off the referees. Now you're taking the time away from the referee as well. What's next?
Yeah, but as you say,
Yeah.
the VAR has taken a lot of the burden, is probably a good word, off of
Yeah.
the referee, which they would only be pleased about. Now, if they disallow a goal for a questionable offside before VAR, they're going to get it in the neck, which refs get it anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
the chance of the crowds about the refs, you don't know what you're doing, to name one of the cleaner ones. But crowds do shout some pretty awful things to refs, and sometimes I won't say they deserve it. Of course they don't. But
Yeah.
some refs are prone to make more mistakes than others, perhaps. But it's a tough job for anyone to do. So I think the more you can lighten their load, as I think VAR has done, because the crowd won't. Okay, they could still be blamed if they are sent to the monitor at the side of the court
Yeah.
of the pitch,
Yeah.
and then I don't know. They tend to then change their decision because they think the VAR people don't like to actually go against a ref's decision unless it's a real obvious error. So if
Right.
they think, well, I think the ref's got that wrong, they'll send him or her. We haven't got women yet in the Premier.